Dostoyevsky's Notes from Underground is a dark tale of the underground man. I read the novel twice, and both times I read part one, I got more and more key takeaways and insights, as you can see from my notes here. I want to go through a quick summary of part one and then go through an analysis of the underground man's character. The novel starts with this man describing himself as sick and unattractive. He complains about a problem that he's having with his liver, but doesn't take any action to fix his problem. The underground man says that he worked in a middle-range civil service career for many years and recently inherited money from a relative, allowing him to retire early. We can quickly see that the underground man has overconsciousness of every macro action and detail in his life, and this has made it very difficult for him to exist beyond himself. He's comfortably settled in his isolated environment in St. Petersburg and is stuck in a repetitive pattern of self-loathing. The underground man describes his overconsciousness as a disease, and that this disease has prevented him from being a normal man that reacts with spontaneousness and instinct. He describes himself as magnanimous, often being overly forgiving and unable to stand up for himself. He is overly sensitive when he feels that someone has wronged him and contemplates retaliation to those that have wronged him in the past. Often thoughts of revenge consume him. However, he is never able to act against the injustices that he feels he's faced. The underground man also convinces himself that moments of sentiment are delusions, but due to his boredom and lack of action in life, that these sentiments keep life interesting. The underground man says that the mid-19th century man acts according to his own disadvantage, as he stubbornly refuses to change his action. He mentions that civilization softens man, arguing that more bloodshed has been committed in the mid-19th century than during the barbaric Roman ages. He describes man as ungrateful, and that if man had lived according to his own free will, it would inevitably lead to his own self-destruction. Part 1 ends with the underground man describing his conscious inertia, and this means that one's overconsciousness ultimately leads them to inaction. Now that you have an idea of part 1, we're going to go a little bit more into the character of the underground man. The underground man's overconsciousness has limited him from developing relationships or building a meaningful life. He never manages to be wicked or good, and argues that fools are better off in comparison to the educated man, as they are not overconsumed by their thoughts. The underground man gets into a pattern of self-loathing, and this habit becomes a sort of pleasure for him, constantly reminiscing about the physical and emotional pain that he is undergoing. He wishes to change, but due to his overconsciousness, this leads him to a lack of action to deal with the pain that he's facing. We also see the underground man describing individuals that are highly conscious, and that these individuals often fall into a pattern of overthinking to the point where they create scenarios in their minds that worsen the situation. They often dream of instances to avenge themselves with justice they feel they deserve, however, are unable to due to their self-consciousness. Ultimately, pain becomes a source of pleasure as it keeps one's mind occupied, especially when nothing is happening in their life. Ideas of revenge are better than the feeling of boredom. Part 1 ends with saying human beings have been given comfort in modern life, however are still ungrateful. For this reason, human beings purposely create chaos to liven things up, which give them the opportunity to pursue a journey they wish to seek. Ultimately, we see in part 1 that one's overconsciousness is indeed a disease, and that if one is too conscious of every bit of action in their life, that this can inevitably lead them into a pattern of inaction as they're stuck more in their thoughts. Part 1 went into discussing the underground man's psychological thinking. We got to understand his living conditions and his life. And so now part 2 of the novel will go into 3 situations that he is faced with certain individuals, and in one case, a group of individuals. And part 1 gives us a very good idea of his psychology and thinking, and see how he will react to those situations later on in the novel.